Ever wondered how drugs interact with our body? Why some medicines work for a particular ailment and others don't? Let's embark on a fascinating journey into the world of pharmacology, where we'll demystify the magic behind medicines. When you swallow a pill or receive an injection, it's not just a concoction of chemicals making their way through your system. Rather, these drugs are engaging in a complex ballet with your body's cells, and at the heart of this dance are the receptors. Receptors are like the locks on the doors of our cells. They are protein molecules that receive chemical signals from outside the cell. When the right key in the form of a drug molecule fits into a receptor, it triggers a cascade of events inside the cell. This is the primary way drugs interact with our bodies, and it's why certain medicines are effective for specific ailments. Picture it like this. If your body was a city, receptors would be the buildings, each with its own unique design and purpose. Some buildings or receptors are only accessible to certain keys or drugs. This specificity is what makes the world of medicine so diverse and fascinating. The interaction between a drug and a receptor isn't as simple as a key turning a lock, though. Various forces are at play, including electrostatic forces, hydrogen bonding, and van der Waals forces. These forces determine the strength of the drug-receptor interaction, which in turn influences the drug's effectiveness. Beyond the initial interaction with the receptor, drugs also influence a host of biological responses within the cell. This is mediated by substances like intracellular cyclic nucleotides, which act like messengers, transmitting the drug signal deeper into the cell. The process we've just described is an oversimplification, of course. The actual mechanics of drug-receptor interaction, including signal transduction, are complex and intricate, involving a symphony of molecular interactions. So next time you pop a pill, remember it's not magic, but the science of receptors at work. To understand drug interactions better, we first need to decipher what receptors are. Picture receptors as locks on the surface of our cells, waiting for the right key to unlock a response. These keys are drugs or natural substances in our body. Let's dive into the different types of receptors, starting with ionotropic receptors. These are like immediate response teams acting swiftly as soon as the right key is inserted. They form an ion channel pore that opens or closes when the receptor is activated, allowing ions such as sodium, potassium or calcium to pass through the cell membrane. Next up we have G-protein coupled receptors, the middlemen of the cellular world. They communicate the message from the outside to the inside of the cell, triggering a series of events. This is achieved by activating an intermediary, the G-protein, which then sets off a chain of reactions, moving on to kinase-linked receptors. These are the long-term planners, often involved in growth and development. When activated, they kickstart a phosphorylation cascade, a series of reactions where proteins pass on a phosphate group like a game of hot potato, leading to changes in the cell. Lastly, we have nuclear receptors, the homebodies. These receptors reside in the cell's nucleus and control gene expression. They are like the directors of a movie, dictating how the script, or DNA, is to be interpreted and acted out. So you see, each type of receptor plays a distinct role in how our bodies respond to substances. They're like characters in a play, each with a unique function, yet all working together to put on an incredible performance. Some receptors act quickly, others slowly, some on the surface and others deep within our cells. Remember, each receptor type has a unique role, making the world of pharmacology incredibly diverse and fascinating. They are the unsung heroes, quietly orchestrating the symphony of life. Understanding them gives us insight into the complex and beautiful world of pharmacology. So stay tuned as we continue our exploration into the captivating world of drug interactions. Now, let's dive into the forces that govern drug-receptor interactions. When it comes to drug-receptor interactions, there are several types of forces at play. The first kind we'll talk about are covalent forces. These are incredibly strong, virtually irreversible bonds where electrons are shared between the drug and the receptor. They form the basis of some of the strongest drug-receptor interactions. An example of this is the drug aspirin, which irreversibly binds to its target enzyme, inhibiting it and providing the desired anti-inflammatory effect. Next, we have electrostatic forces. These are interactions between charged particles. They can be either attractive or repulsive, depending on the charges involved. Electrostatic forces are particularly important in drug-receptor interactions, as they can determine the affinity of a drug for a particular receptor. The stronger the electrostatic attraction, the higher the affinity, and thus the higher the potency of the drug. Then there are van der Waals forces. These are weaker, transient forces that occur when atoms are in close proximity. While they may be weak on their own, in a drug-receptor interaction, they can add up to have a significant impact. They are particularly important in defining the specificity of a drug for a particular receptor. Lastly, we have hydrophobic forces. These are interactions between non-polar molecules in an aqueous environment. In the context of drug-receptor interactions, these forces can drive the binding of a drug to a receptor, particularly if the receptor is embedded within a cell membrane. The interplay of these forces determines the affinity and specificity of drug-receptor interactions. The stronger the overall interaction between the drug and the receptor, the higher the affinity, and the more likely the drug is to elicit a response. Conversely, the more specific the interaction, the less likely the drug is to bind to off-target receptors, reducing the likelihood of side effects. So the forces we learned in physics not only keep our world intact, but also play a vital role in our health. Drugs do not work in isolation. They need mediators to elicit a biological response. Now, let's delve into the fascinating world of these mediators. One of the key mediators of biological response are intracellular cyclic nucleotides. These are small molecules that act as secondary messengers in the process of signal transduction. Cyclic nucleotides like cyclic adenosine monophosphate, CAMP, and cyclic guanosine monophosphate, CGMP, have a profound influence on a variety of biological responses. They regulate many processes such as inflammation, immune response, and even our heart rate. In essence, they are the conductors of the biological orchestra that drugs come to join. These cyclic nucleotides work by binding to their respective protein kinases, which in turn activate a cascade of reactions. This cascade ultimately leads to the intended biological response. For example, when adrenaline, a drug, binds to its receptor, it stimulates the production of CAMP. This CAMP then initiates a series of biochemical events resulting in increased heart rate and blood pressure. But the role of cyclic nucleotides is not limited to just this. They also regulate the activity of ion channels, transcription factors, and even enzymes, making them pivotal in the drug response mechanism. In addition to cyclic nucleotides, there are other mediators that play a crucial role in the biological response. These include calcium ions, nitric oxide, inositol trisphosphate, and many others. Each of these mediators has its own unique role and interaction with different drugs. For instance, calcium ions are essential in muscle contraction and neurotransmission. Drugs that influence calcium ion channels can have effects on the heart rate, blood pressure, and even mood. Nitric oxide, on the other hand, acts as a vasodilator and neurotransmitter. Drugs targeting nitric oxide pathways can be used to treat conditions like hypertension and erectile dysfunction. So, we see that the world of drug action is not a solo performance. It's a complex symphony of interactions with various mediators playing their own unique parts in eliciting the intended biological response. The effectiveness of a drug is not just about the drug itself, but also about these essential mediators. Finally, how does a drug tell a cell what to do? The answer lies in signal transduction. Let's dive into this amazing process of biological communication and understand the drug receptor mechanism. Firstly, imagine a drug as a key and the receptor as a lock. When the key fits into the lock, the door opens. Similarly, when a drug binds to its receptor, it activates a sequence of biochemical events. This process is called signal transduction. Now let's break down this process. Signal transduction begins with the recognition of a signal, the drug, by the receptor. This interaction is specific, just like a key made for a particular lock. The drug receptor binding initiates the transduction process, converting the drug signal into a cellular response. This conversion is achieved through a series of biochemical events. The activated receptor triggers a signal cascade like dominoes falling one after another. This cascade amplifies the signal, making a single drug molecule capable of affecting numerous molecules within the cell. The signal cascade often involves second messengers, molecules that relay the signal within the cell. Common second messengers include cyclic nucleotides like cyclic AMP and cyclic GMP. These messengers help transmit the signal from the receptor to the cell's machinery that executes the response. The final step in signal transduction is the response. This is where the cell acts on the signal it received. The response could be as diverse as a change in gene expression, cell growth, or even cell death. So, from the moment a drug enters your body, it's a journey of signal transduction. The drug sends a message to the cell understands the message and acts accordingly. This is the basic mechanism behind how drugs work in our body. This process is complex and sophisticated, yet it happens in fractions of a second, millions of times in our body every day. Amazing, isn't it? That's how our body communicates with drugs, through a complex but efficient language of signals. So we've taken a journey into the world of receptors and how drugs interact with them. We've delved into the types of receptors, the forces that come into play during drug-receptor interactions, and the role of intracellular cyclic nucleotides and other mediators in biological responses. We've also shed light on the mechanism of drug-receptor interaction and signal transduction. This knowledge is just scratching the surface. Subscribe for more, because you won't find me later. There's a lot more to explore in the world of pharmacology.